Look Outreach is underwritten by the generous support of Munter Enterprises. Family owned and operated since 1972, integrity is important, as our family name is on every project. Our word is our bond. Munter Enterprises. Just build it.
Welcome back, everyone. Well, you know how sometimes things are not what they appear? When it comes to politics, that can be especially true. I don't know if any of you just thought of House of Cards, but I did. Well, recently we've been reporting on a story where the governor is recommending the elimination of the minimum wage tip credit for the service industry. And we decided to bring in some experts to explain what this means, not only to the industry for which they are a part, but what it means for the workers and what it means to you when you actually need the services of someone in this industry. And joining me today is Nancy Bambara, who's Vice President, DZ Restaurants. Yes, the DZ Restaurants for Chianti, Boca, Forna. Great, Nance, to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
And John Carr, who is the owner of the Adirondack Brewery, craft beer all over the state, right, John?
Correct.
Yeah, that's what I thought. This is a complex issue.
Very.
If I started just at the simplest level, it would be people in the service industry get a little bit lower than the minimum wage. That's obviously made up many times over with tips, with a protection in there that if that less than the minimum wage in tips doesn't come up to equal the minimum wage, the restaurateurs are required to pay that difference. A lot of people in the service industry, especially in our communities, make an awful lot of money because of tourism and just the interest in being in our communities. Why would anybody want to mess with this, Nancy?
I mean, I can't speak to what the governor's trying to do, but I think at the end of the day, he's wrapping an entire industry, the service industry, together. And I think our initiative is to try to separate the restaurant industry from it a little bit, because this industry is not broken. It does not need to be fixed. People support their families on this industry. They live a very good life on making tips. They reinvest back in the community by buying homes and cars, sending their children off to school. So I can't speak as to why the governor wants to look at this. But I don't think that the small amount of possibly offenders to the tipped minimum wage law it makes enough for him to change this.
Well, you know what, Nancy, and I want to cycle back just on one thing. The service industry, we think of restaurants immediately, right? But of course, in your industry, John, it affects people in a lot of different aspects. It could be hotel maids, it could be car wash, but of course we think of bartenders and we think of waiters and waitresses inside of the restaurant industry. Without getting too political here, it sounds to me like if it ain't broke, why would you fix it? And if it's a system that really does work well, so that there's probably something else behind it. Now, it is politics, so of course politicians speak to their base, and that's about as far as I want to go on that, so you can fill in the gaps yourself. But from your perspective, John, what do you think about this?
My concern with it is, we're looking at one group of employees that work on a team. We have a team of people that are great. We have cooks, we have dishwashers, bartenders, we have everybody.
Sure.
And when you take one group who's already the highest paid in that segment of people, and you want to elevate them even higher, it hurts the other people on staff.
Right.
That's part of my concern with it. The other thing, too, is the idea here, and I applaud the governor's effort to make more money for people. That's fine. That's a good thing. Every restaurant is trying to do that ourselves. But what's going to happen, and what I see when I travel the state of New York, is a lot of restaurants, that were open lunch and dinner 7 days a week are only open, on weekends now, or only open for lunch on Saturdays, or they're limiting their hours because they cannot afford to be open, and that is what's hurting all the other people on that service team. Mm-hmm. If you're closed, you don't need a manager, you don't need a cook, you don't need dishwashers. And these are good jobs in small towns. I travel, Oswego and Binghamton and Rochester. I'm all over New York State.
Yeah, right.
I'm seeing this statewide. Mm-hmm. And I think we need to really stop and look at who's making what in this service team, and is this really where our efforts should be? I think what we really ought to be looking at is getting more people to go out and eat in full-service restaurants that employ more people than limited service.
You know, Nance, I've heard
sure.
from other people that, you know, the whole reason this issue is coming up is there are discrimination concerns. That, you know, minorities or whatever may not be treated the same, men or women may not be treated the same in the same kind of situation. You know, you and David, you run the most successful restaurants, you know, in probably the whole state. But it, you know, that's not an issue.
I think that that voice has come from some surveys that have been done down in the Deep South and in the Midwest, and
Yeah, right.
I think the reality is New York is a very unique state to work in, and I think that if you travel up and down New York, you will not see discrimination. I think white, black, men, women, if you provide good service, you're being compensated for it. If you're a car salesman, and you're good at it, you're being compensated for
Yes,
it with
that's
your
right.
commission. And I think it's very similar. And I think it drives the industry for people to work better and work harder. They can earn more money. The more knowledge they have, the more interactive they are with your table, Jesse. I'm sure you're going to leave one person maybe a little bit of a better tip because they have been more because they're better at what their
More
job is.
attentive
It doesn't
or
have
more- that's
anything to
right.
do with whether they're white or they're black or they're a male or they're a female.
Right, and you know, and I would argue here too is that, you know, you start to eliminate the incentives for people. It's just
sure.
human nature. You know, the human nature firing on two fronts here. One is that if you're a server and you know there's an incentive involved because your tip is going to be a major portion of your income, you make that extra effort with somebody.
Yeah.
You know, and then I can't help but think that if the governor's proposal is adapted by the Department of Labor and that you're paying more to go into that restaurant anyway, you may go fewer times.
Well, let's talk about Maine.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, good.
The
Maine's a
state
good
of
one.
Maine had a similar initiative to raise minimum wage in 2016. It passed. It went through, and in 2017, the servers themselves were seeing a decline in attendance at restaurants.
Sure.
They were seeing a decline in tipping
Significant.
habits from consumers, and they were seeing the elimination of their jobs because a lot of restaurants converted to limited service, where you don't have servers. You go up to a counter and get your food. They went back to the legislature and protested to have that law rescinded. And I think that is a prime example. I mean, that's not that far from us. It's a very similar tourist base where they see a lot of the same tourists coming up 95 that we see coming up 87.
Yeah,
And
sure.
those employees recognized within a year what the detriment of this was.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, we need to stop and look at what the detriment to these
Right.
servers. On the face, it looks like, oh, I'm going to make more money. Whoa, not. That's not going to happen.
Right.
Fewer people are going to eat out. There's going to be fewer job opportunities for these types of restaurants. And I think the consumer, who they're looking for other things. They're looking at HelloFresh. They're looking at
That's right,
Whole
yeah.
Foods, prepared dinners. They have a lot of dining options, and that is not full-service restaurants. And I think that's going to hurt the employment.
But let's just quickly go back to Maine. I mean, I think if we look at Maine, we can clearly state that this is a failed policy. It was already enacted, and it already was rescinded. And I think, you know, you talk about servers. I'm talking about front of the house staff. I'm not just talking about servers. I'm talking about bartenders. I'm talking about our youth, our bussers who are coming up the service industry. I mean, we have bussers that can walk away with $20 an hour at 16, 17, 18 years old. You know, I think this proposal will dramatically change the industry. It will be catastrophic to, I think, we are the largest employer, I believe, in New York State. I'm not sure that there's any employer in the restaurant industry that's larger than us. I think that this would be a catastrophic policy to the entire economy, to our industry. I just think it's been proven to be a failed policy.
Well, you know, as I stated at the beginning, you know, things are not always what they appear.
For
and
sure.
when you dig down and learn a little bit more about this, then you start to question the rationale. By the way, here's where we are with this. The government has gone to the Labor Board. The Labor Board, comprised pretty much of 3 members, is going to decide this after a number of public hearings. So I encourage you to get involved. Find out where the public hearings are. I think there's like 6 of them between now and June, because your voice being heard will affect what these 3 individuals on the Labor Board will actually decide at the end. So many of us know people, you know, talking to the 2 of you, I know so many people in the service industry And, you know, I just can't help, you know, without trying to take sides, just to say this is not adding up to me. It just doesn't add up. So I want to thank you both for taking the time to come in. I know it affects you both personally very much.
It does, for sure.
And your staff and you know, restaurants are built like families. You know,
They are.
They really are. You want to know what a family restaurant is like? Go to Chianti's. That's nice.
Jesse.
Great to see both of you. Thank you for coming
Same
in.
to you. Thank you.
To see this interview again, you can head to our website, looktvonline.com.